I think recommend just a few changes to the agenda right before you get going, if I may. If you'd like to delete action item number 2. This was an error by me, and I apologize that it was on here. There needs to be a lot more work around that with our building principals, and whether it truly is something viable that they can bring. But right now, I'd like you just to remove that from tonight's agenda. And I just ask that same breath, replace it with an action item to open up CIEA negotiations for the current year that we're in, the 21-22 school year. And I've given you just a 1-page piece. We can go more in depth when you get to that, and we can speak a little more fully about that. But I'd like to add that in its place. Thank you.
Sure. All right, first item on this evening's agenda is Idaho County Commissioner Skip Brandt going to talk to us regarding our forest funds, otherwise known as SRS. Good evening. Thank you.
Good evening, board. Sorry.
We need to add her to the.
So I am Idaho County Commissioner Skip Brandt. If you haven't met me yet, but besides being a county commissioner for Idaho County, I am the representative for the state of Idaho to the WIR, which is Western Interstate Region of NACO, which is the National Association of Counties. Along with that, I am also the state representative that serves on the National Forested Counties and Schools Coalition, all these acronyms. But both these groups are focused, well, WIR is focused on all the Western issues, but the National Association of Counties and Forested Counties and Schools are focused on one thing, and that is SRS. And with serving on these committees, I am tasked to paying close attention to the SRS process and staying plugged into everything that happens with it. And this includes monthly phone calls with both those groups, along with trips to DC to make sure that this issue stays in front of Congress. It is a complicated process, and I asked to be on the agenda tonight so I could try to explain to the board and everybody about what is SRS, because it gets mixed up with PIL a lot. And then there's different titles in SRS. And so dropping back to Idaho County receives the largest chunk of SRS funding in the state of Idaho, which is this year is just over $7 million. And the PIL program is strictly for county government. It's payment in lieu of taxes, and it's based strictly on federal acres that we house in the county. SRS takes that into consideration, but it also goes back to the timber receipts that the county got back in the heyday. When I went to school down at Kuski, this district was the richest school district in the state of Idaho because of the 25% that we got off of all the timber cut on federal lands. But now that we're not cutting, we're just letting it burn. Congress has put in this process to try to keep us harmless. The difficulty is that this act, which was started by Senator Larry Craig and Senator Ron Wyden back in 2000. And it started out, it was originally SRS and R, then it just went to SRS, and then at some point in there, it became Craig Wyden funding. So you can hear multiple names of this funding that the schools and the roads get. It's also a misnomer that it's county funds. PILT is county funds. SRS is really focused at schools and roads. With the different titles, there are 3 different titles. There's Title 1, which is the money that goes to roads and schools. Then there's Title II, which is a portion of that funding that goes to the Forest Service projects within the county. And then Title III, which is SRF, which is for fire mitigation, search and rescue, and those type of operations that the county does do, but it's a minimum amount, about 500,000 of the 700 or 7 million that we get. So back a few months ago, you might have seen where I testified in front of Congress for an SRS fix. What happened is the last reauthorization of SRS for 3 years, they forgot about a little reporting deadline in there. By the time it got to the president's desk and signed, that reporting date had passed. And that date was where the county decides how much of that $7 million goes into each title. In Idaho County, we have always put in the maximum amount, which is 85%. It goes into Title I. Then the maximum amount that we can put into Title II or Title III is 7%, and 8% has to go into Title II. Without this fix, instead of the schools and roads getting 85%, they would have been locked in at only 80, and the rest of it, the rest of the 20% would have gone into Title II and nothing into Title III for search and rescue and fire mitigation. Amazingly enough, and I never thought it would happen, but we got it passed, and it had to happen quickly. But through a procedural move in both the Senate and the House, it was put out there, and not one senator or congressman objected. And in all the animosity and the hard divide that's back there, I wouldn't have thought that was possible, but we got it done. So we're whole as far as that goes. In your packet, there are 4 things that I gave to the board, and there's some extra copies I think up here if anybody'd like them. First, there's a cover letter from State Treasurer Ellsworth, who talks about some changes that were put in the act with regards to Title III, nuanced stuff. And then there's a list of the forest distribution amounts for Idaho County. And it shows the different amounts that go to different schools. And with SRS, we are blessed by this amount. We get $7 million. Lewis County gets $5.24 because they only have 15 acres of federal lands. And so you can look at those numbers. And if you notice, Cami School gets $200 and some $1,000 of SRS, even though their school is in Lewis County, but they get that money because of kids that come from Idaho County and occupy chairs in their school. The other thing that we got in there is a sheet of from the State Board of Education with regards to ADA numbers, because this flagged me when I was looking at all the numbers. And then the last sheet is a historical breakdown of what the county and all the highway districts and school districts got going back to 2007. But back to the ADA number, if you look on the first sheet, I highlighted it. The District 244's payment was calculated with an ADA number of 1,065.9 students. And the information that I got, I was pretty sure that it should have been closer to 1,200. But the number that I got from the state board was 1,163.18. So if you look at the payment amount, each Idaho County student is worth $950, round numbers, for each district. So if we're missing 100 students because of that calculation, that's a chunk of change. There's $100,000 that we didn't get because that ADA number was wrong. And I don't know I don't even begin to try to understand that component of how that mechanism works. But that is something that we really need to pay attention to. We're going to be locked into that number now because the checks have been sent out everywhere. But next year, that really needs to be focused on. So if there is truly closer to 1,200 students, we want that calculation. And I went through everything pretty fast. I'm sure I skipped something and probably confused a few of you. But at this point, I stand for questions.
Maybe you covered it and I didn't catch it, but how does the 7 million get divided up between the highway and the school?
So again, 7 million gets divided up in that 85% of that 7 million goes into Title I, which is just over $6 million. It was written down here. And then of that Title I, 70% goes to road districts and 30% goes to school districts. And the road districts are they're broken out by how many miles of road that they maintain.
What do we need to do to reverse those two numbers?
You know, it's one of those things in the Idaho State Senate. Every year, there is always a request somewhere for increasing the sin tax, increasing the tax on liquor and cigarettes. And it was always supported until somebody dropped the bill that said where that extra money would go. Then there's a dogfight and they kill each other's bill, and the sin taxes haven't been raised for 30 years. So that's concerning. You try to change the formula, then you take a chance of losing the ship.
So the difference in ADA, so the ADA came from
The state board.
the state board.
Yeah.
And the 1163 came from,
I'm sorry, 1163 came from the state board.
And
Yeah.
then where did the
I
1065 come from?
don't know, to tell you the truth. And that's where I'm assuming this came from the treasurer's office. They get those numbers somewhere from, I don't know if it's the state board or if it's the school board association. That's,
So that came
But-
from the state treasurer's office.
yeah.
So that's where we start with us.
It sounds like a number though, that's COVID related, because we did have a lot less enrollment.
Is it the previous year maybe?
Well, the number that I got, that 1163, was calculated based on December 3rd of 21.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if
That would
there's
be this year.
new numbers out. Down.
When they're looking at the ADA, do they look at the 2021 school year, like the year before they get the
That's-
funds?
I've never really noticed this. Again,
Okay.
I just make sure that the thing goes
Yeah,
forward. I
right.
haven't gotten down in the details
Awesome,
of all this, but, and that just is one of those things that popped out.
totally,
Because I'm
yeah,
pretty sure we were bigger than that.
yeah, Okay.
So an extra 100,000.
yeah, that might help, yeah. Excellent. Thanks for all you do.
Sure. Any other questions? Perfect. Give me a call anytime. Yeah, come up with new questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, the second item on the agenda this evening is Vince Rondog is going to discuss a petition to the board regarding having a
I have a few more of these handouts here about the types of audits that exist out there. If anybody wants this to be passed around, there's just a few. Let me know if I speak too fast, too slow, too soft, too low. This is the 2008 Fresnel Gauge audit report done in 2008. I say that because that's 14 years And by the way, it really hasn't changed much in thickness. It's about 6 pages more. And then the last one here is this last year's audit. What I do want to point out in the audit, sort of an appraisal report of the school finances. This is considered an independent auditor's report. The phrases that you use, the language that they have in CPA world, the financial world, is obviously a whole different set of linguistics. What I'm trying to do tonight is lay it out in layman terms. I've handed 3 different pages to the school board here. Hopefully you've all got them. I'll just start off with, this is a presentation and argument for an independent audit on the Mountain View School District's finances. This is not a discussion on casting aspersions or suspicions on any particular individual or individuals. This is a discussion on restoring the confidence, trust, and foundational support from the tax-paying community. This also is a discussion on due diligence and responsibility. The evidence for lack of confidence in the school district finances is reflected in the continuous failure of the school levies. As a reminder, this community is the authority, and this authority needs an independent accounting of the monies it has given to the school system to spend on the education of our children. This is the reset needed to rebuild community assurances that the monies are being effectively, efficiently, and responsibly spent. From last October to now, myself and many other taxpayers have requested a forensic audit. As a reminder, this issue came up in July of 2020, in which the Central Idaho Education Association pushed for the same thing with Ms. Edwards there as the negotiations teams member. So there is history with this request on a forensic audit. The regular audit, as I showed you, is what is really called a qualified audit report that Fresnel Gage produces. This is a routine review using routine accounting techniques that report on the financial health, financial performance of the institution, and is conducted on a routine timeline. And there may be statutory requirements for all Idaho school districts to meet this. I think the answer is found with the Idaho State School Board of Education. A forensic audit is a layman's term with broad stroke connotations and meaning. Forensic audit is actually a financial statement audit. CPAs do not use the forensic audit term because it could easily be misconstrued as an audit of the financial statements, which has a very specific meaning. Financial statement audits require special licensing and are subject to peer review process. A forensic audit uses different techniques specialized and trained auditors who possess a certified financial forensic credential. These audits look for specific ineffective, inefficient, and or irresponsible accounting practices. Only if the audit yields intentional, irresponsible accounting practices would the results generate potential criminal investigation. This decision to follow up a criminal investigation would fall to the county prosecutor. Only when there is evidence of wrongdoing can the Board of Trustees initiate this type of audit. At this time, I am not recommending a forensic audit. The audit I am looking for involves an independent CPA who can employ the tools of internal control assessment and analytical testing. Swallow those words a few times. Takes a while to digest what they mean, but here they are. The internal control assessment. Strong internal controls ensure unintentional errors or intentional irregularities would be identified in the normal course of operations. When a CPA assesses an entity's internal controls, they evaluate the processes used for cash payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, debt inventory, journal entries, financial statement preparation. So for example, who initiates the transactions, who approves transactions, who records them in the accounting system? Are the user security rights consistent with job duties? Do user security rights conflict with best practices? An internal control assessment report identifies the strengths, weaknesses, and recommendations for improvement in an entity's system of internal controls. An internal control assessment can include data analysis for high-risk areas, especially if there has been a known embezzlement or material risk has been identified. So basically, your internal control consists of a systematic measure that are designed to ensure that the organization, one, safeguards its assets and resources, two, deters and detects honest errors and dishonest acts, three, ensures accuracy, completeness of accounting data, four, ensures reliable and timely financial management information, five, ensures adherence to policies, procedures, processes, six, achieves its objectives and fulfills its mission. Analytical testing. When high-risk areas are known, a CPA sometimes analyzes transactions to test processes and identifies anomalies. For example, for payroll, they might test whether an employee also received payments as vendors, or whether pay rates and bonuses were properly approved and entered into the accounting system, whether terminated employee payments were proper, whether established policies and procedures were followed. They would also review the audit trail to determine if any transactions were improperly changed after transactions cleared the bank or after final month end and year-end closure processes. The testing process varies depending on the risks identified. It typically involves both data analysis and tracing transactions in the accounting system and supporting documents. That's a real condensed version of what this type of audit will do. It gets even more complicated, and I don't need to waste and bore the heck out of all of us over the details on this, because it really does get into the weeds. But this is just a sample of the type of audit that I'm endorsing, as opposed to the forensic that has been pushed around for the last 2 years now. What CPA firm can produce this sort of audit? I have found 6 listed from the Idaho Society of CPAs, which the board has the list of, on which Ms. McClure has been the most informative and approachable. It has been recommended that businesses, government agencies should change their CPA firms every 5 years as a best practice rule. That's why I mentioned the audit going back to at least 2008 with Presnell engaged. This came out of the Enron scandal. And since then, CPA changeovers have been recommended every 5 years. And that just, like I said, best business practice. The above type of audit can be performed for approximately $10,000 to $15,000. The forensic type audit can cost around $20,000 for a school budget of $15 million. Finally, as Board of Trustees, you have placed yourself into a position that brings about the element of fiduciary responsibility. Fiduciary duty requires board members to stay objective, unselfish, responsible, honest, trustworthy, and efficient. Board members, as stewards of public trust, must always act for the good of the organization, rather than for the benefit of themselves or individuals. They need to exercise reasonable care in all decision-making without placing the organization under unnecessary risk. Thank you. Any questions?
I did look into it. January 6th, I emailed Denise McClure and she said she would be available for a few months. I also was forwarded an Aerofish Consulting out of Salt Lake City. I think with this person being, with our current business finance person leaving after 34 years, I think I'm a little worried about the new person's liability. If there is something, it would be nice to have somebody here facilitating the changeover. And I did contact the State Department of Ed and they said they could help from a distance. But I agree that there needs to be something. I just really have a hard time spending the district money, but I understand that it's important. So I also worry that our district office is already overwhelmed and we have a lot of important reports that need to get turned in. And I don't want to interfere with that right now with an audit, because that would just add a whole, it would be impossible to get the reports done and an audit done. So I don't know if there's something that could be looked into maybe at the end of June, you know, something like that. You know, I did pass that on to you in January, remember? Okay. So, you know, something, I think something does need to be in place for the protection of our new employees. But I don't know how that would look. If the board has any other,
May I comment on that?
yeah.
So in my conversation with Ms. McClure, her availability is probably in 3 to 4 months, which the timing hopefully might be good for the job being filled by that time. I don't personally believe that an audit of any form can be performed without the appropriate staff or personnel to acquire the information that's necessary for the auditor to proceed with that action. It's like anything else, good information in, good information out, bad information in, bad information out. So if we want a good, legitimate, meaningful audit, we need some time under the new staff's belt to be able to retrieve that information for the whatever auditor the board chooses to employ.
So they, I'm sorry, did they give you a time frame though on what their experiences are with the stakes a month? This is a week.
No, I asked that question. Thanks for bringing it up. It's 3 to 4 days at the most.
Oh.
Sometimes 2 to 3. When they come in with this form of audit, it's a toolbox and they just pull out their tool, grab the appropriate data they need, plug it into their system, and then the tool generates the answer that should be given, that they should be, well, the answer that should be given that we all want to see. Now, sometimes it might produce an answer that we might not like. And then that answer, that bad answer has to be investigated further to see if there was just clerical errors involved or not. Again, this is not to cast any kind of aspersions on anybody. It's just the facts. We make errors as human beings. So, yeah, mea culpa, right? Going back more to what you were saying, Ms. Edwards, some of the other contacts I had on this list, one was suggested that we actually employ a firm. And the closest firms, one's out of Spokane, one's out of Boise. But it's my view that that would cost the school district a lot more money because they bring a much bigger team into the picture. So I think keeping it to a smaller, more manageable level for the budget issues like Ms. McClure might be more appropriate. Again, that's a decision the board would have to make. We really want to go with that.
Just to piggyback for consideration, because the board obviously sounds like the next, let's say 2 to 3 months, maybe having this conversation. Obviously, you're going to be going through, you have to go through an audit every year. So you don't get to leave that off the side. And maybe that first step is that you have a completely new firm. Start with that. That would lend you some basis of comparison anyway of many years. It has been many years that the same firm has done the audit. That might allow the board to at least do some comparison of a completely new firm. It's not associated, has not been associated with Mountain View, give you some of those details. And then perhaps, I don't know this, but you may ask, we would like these 3 or 4 things to go deeper into an audit that would give us perhaps more information. That's just something for your thoughts.
One more item, FYI, if I read the expenditures from last October, the audit cost the school district $16,000. Is that,
Yeah, that's,
I read that
it's-
correctly.
It's a very expensive endeavor.
So there's sort of a baseline to go without there, folks. Forensic audit, if that absolutely has to go down that road, is $4,000 more on average.
Well, you'd still need your school audit though.
Is that a statutory requirement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you're gonna have that expense above and beyond, because the board has to have an audit each and every.
Does the state recognize the difference between a forensic audit and a regular audit?
I can't answer.
That they would say the forensic audit covered the state requirement?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it. Perhaps
Okay.
it does do a 2-in-1, and you can ask for some more in-depth things as we start to look at that process.
Okay, very good.
I think we're on the right track. I would echo Ms. Edwards' concern about not so much protecting, but just respecting new staff. But I'm expecting that because of numbers, we're going to be dealing with a lot of dates and that sort of thing. That should be a pretty bright line that we'll be able to maintain that, because that absolutely needs to happen. But it sounds like we're on the right track talking about this. So I thank you for going to the obvious effort. It's
Just a
great.
sidebar, try to avoid approaching CPA firms during the tax season.
Yeah.
Right on. Thanks again.
When do we put the bid out for the audit, the yearly audit?
I think we put a bid. I am in a part of one. So
When do we have to decide?
I'd have to pull the date. Late fall, they're here to give you the, and as Vince showed, it's crazy language. A good audit is an unqualified, some language like that, where instead of just saying, hey, everything looks good, some of the language almost gives you some weird reason of doubt, but like, why would it be unqualified, which means it's a good thing, which is all of the audits that we've had through all the, at least 08 of all of it unqualified.
Well, and for example, this last audit that was given, it was a qualified audit, but within, without a clean opinion. Well, what's that mean? So apparently there was an anomaly within the report about some retirement issue that did not give it a clean opinion. So I found that rather curious as well. So you're right, the language is.
It also rises to, that's presented to you by the firm, right? They came and spoke to Ingrid CPE that night. And, this obviously probably helps the board at least feel like you have the ability to ask some questions that might dive in deeper. Because many times it's so overwhelming, it's tough to ask what something that you might learn more. So anyway,
Okay. There are no more questions. We'll move on. The next item on the agenda is the public input session. And list of people, we have in effect 4. First person up is sorry. Okay. Katrina Huger. Ms. Huger, before you start, I just want to make sure, based on what you've written here, you're aware that item
Yes,
2 has been.
yes, thank you. I'm here this evening to speak on action item 5, B, and C, because I believe that the district is out of compliance on policy in regards to the hiring of those 2 positions. There is no in-district transfer policy in the district. Policy 5100 clearly lays out policy and procedures for employees who are interested in applying for open, vacated, advertised positions. Personnel policy 5220 also lays out the procedure for all district employees and reads assignments, reassignments, and transfers that all staff shall be subject to assignment, reassignment, and transfer of positions and duties by the board, superintendent, supervisor, other administrative staff, etc. Changes in assignment may also be made at the request of an employee. The certificated employee who wishes to transfer to an open position must submit an application and a resume to the district office personnel staff and will be considered with other applicants. Any open position will be considered a vacancy and will be advertised. Assignment shall be based upon the qualifications of the candidate and the philosophy and needs of the district. The final decision on transfer or alteration of any assignments rests with the Board of Trustees. Teachers shall be assigned at the levels and in the subjects that are appropriate and allowable for the certificates and endorsements they hold. The superintendent shall provide for a system of assignment, reassignment, and transfer of classified staff. including voluntary transfers and promotions consistent with this policy and state law. And I would also advise you to go back and revisit District Policy 5120 in regards to equal employment opportunity and non-discrimination.
Thank you. John Severia.
Larry, I changed my topic. What I want to do is give you some good news. For a year, just about a year now, I've been working on constitutional funding for schools. Couple, 3 weeks ago, I believe I sent all the trustees an email with some really good news in it. I don't know if you got it, or if you didn't, or if you read it, or if you didn't. But basically, my effort over the past year is to try to bring this community together in a way that everyone would benefit, in a way that the Constitution of the state would be adhered to, and in a way that we get rid of an unfair tax on property. So in doing so, and doing this work and working with attorneys in Boise, I pulled up some information that said in 1965, the legislature of Idaho decided to move forward and pass and enact a sales tax of 3%. That was sold to the public on mainly school funding. Now that's a fair tax, a sales tax everybody pays for. In 1966, on November 8th, they had the public vote on it, and the public, based on what the governor and the legislature said about school funding, passed the sales tax. At that time, they had 17 exemptions to that tax. Today, they have over 106. So what's happened in 62 years is that our legislatures, maybe not the ones that are in office now, but in the last 62 years, they gave away the funding that those voted for, the public voted for in 66. So today's school budget is $2 billion for the state of Idaho. If you calculate up all the exemptions, it's 2.9 billion. So I've been working with legislators in Boise, and I think they're finally starting to get the picture. There are people now that are starting to say, hey, I think this person has a point, and it really wasn't my point. A lot of the attorneys that I've talked to have been helping me with this. So I think if the community will come together, as I suggested, and go to Boise, where the funding is supposed to come from constitutionally, when we come together as a district and a community, I think we can get funding back the way it was. As a matter of fact, there was a bill put through the legislature in 2021. Actually, it wasn't put through. It was submitted. It never got to committee. And that bill proposed that if they were to take away the exemptions, they could lower the sales tax in the state to 4% and still have 1.5 billion more to fund our schools. I have a copy of that. I think you guys may have copies in your email. So that's my point is, can we ever come together as a community and get proper constitutional fair tax to fund our schools? I believe the avenue is wide open, and I'll leave it with it.
Thank you. Brent Stevens.
I signed up to speak regarding the audit. I thank you so much for all the work that you did. It was really informative, really helpful. I guess since I've got my 3 minutes, can you not hear me? I can talk a lot louder. I'd like to see the board look into, and apparently the superintendent's involved in working this out and the decisions and the information. Look into a dual purpose audit. It sounds like we're spending the approximate estimated amount annually. It also sounds like that hasn't been put out for bid for some time. And I think it would be good use of funds and also solve what I think is a pretty big problem going forward. If we could find out if Ms. McClure or one of these other organizations could do a dual audit with those funds that are all already allocated for the annual audit. Just thanks again to Vince and thanks to the board. I know it's been an uncomfortable and contentious topic, but I think it's just really important. Not so much looking back and trying to find culprits or anything like that. It's about answering questions about how are we really truly managing all this money? Where is it going? Has there been human error? I just think it's really critical. And I would say, please, check into it. And if we've got a paper too, as unfortunate as that is, I still think it would be wise to do it. Thank you.
And final name on the list is Jill Lane.
That's me.
Well,
Oh, Bill.
I kind of feel like,
No, you go. You're good.
so I just, probably sound like broken record here. I just want to talk about the 4-day school week. I just ask of you guys to think about the vote and how it affects our kids. So the 4-day is coming up. You guys are going to talk about it. Thinking about tabling this, and I'm not entirely against this 4-day. I'm not, but I'm not convinced. That's where I'm at with it. I feel like the vote was just made and we haven't really looked into it. It's easy to make the vote, but all the details come later. And it's more like of a distraction. And I think about our kids, like just getting opinions, like all of our teachers, some are on board, some aren't. It was advertised maybe as a cost savings. Like, what is the cost savings? We've already made the cuts for the next school year. Like, what is that price amount? Is it really going to help us money wise? Like, I mean, if it's going to give us 3 or 4 million for our next school year, yeah, I get that. Maybe as a retention recruiting tool to get more teachers in. I mean, I can think of 4 teachers that are teaching over in Cottonwood that I think that should be teaching here, like great teachers. So just thinking about tabling it for now, to me, just looking at this, we have a lot to do. This is just more like a distraction to me. Get the research, figure it out, and then let's revisit it. That's all I'm saying. Just, we've got to think about when we do this 4-day, how does it affect these kids? A longer day, like half an hour, 45 minutes with my boys at the end of the day. I feel bad for those teachers. Just, I mean, it's a long day for these kids. We have special needs kids, over 200, an extra day gone. I just think in the big picture, when you guys are thinking about your vote for this, really think about how it affects each and one of those, every one of those kids. And I know it's a hard decision. The biggest is just thinking, to me, we have bigger items on the table. 3 to 4 million we've got to come up with here, not for this school year coming up, but the next school year. That to me, like this 4-day, it's like nothing compared to like you guys sitting here next year. If we don't have any change, what are we going to do? It's going to be major cuts, major. So like a 4-day, how are we even going to recruit a teacher if the job even isn't available? So I just ask of you guys just to think about this when you go over it. Most importantly, I'm invested, my husband's invested, whatever you guys decide to do, we support you guys. We know your job is very, very hard. So we're in support. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, moving to the next item on the agenda, it's an information item and
Was this gentleman signed in? Did you?
No.
that's an information item. B. Edwards regarding the superintendent search.
Do you want to push that to the action piece?
Yeah, we'll push that to
Or
the,
do that
to
In the beginning
the,
of this agenda, we
Yeah.
didn't realize there was going to be an ad from. So if we're comfortable with that,
yeah, I'd like to move it to the executive session.
Very well.
I mean, it's going to be covered there anyway. This was just a late add to that.
I can just give an update that there's one applicant right now.
Yes.
So just just so the community knows.
And moving on, we have the superintendent report.
So my pretty quick report, very similar in terms of updates of people applying for positions is not great. I have some applicants in some of those areas, not perhaps the level of experience that I think the district would like to see, certainly in our business manager realm, or at least some realm of school finance. So right now, it's a holding piece. I have shared with Mr. Dunn that once the business manager can get something that I can give to the board, I would like the board to, for that to be the board's interview piece. I know that that would be normally a little bit odd. I can certainly help facilitate that. The reason it's a little bit odd is normally wouldn't be looking for this number of people, and your superintendent would very much be a part of that. And so if your new superintendent is onboarded by then and can play a role in that, I think that would be really important. Our federal program special ed director, it's a difficult fill. General school and department hires, I'll just say those are ongoing with building leaders looking to fill resignations. There's a few retirements that you'll see coming. Right now, we're seeing some staff in each of our schools drop off, and principals are scrambling to get those open. And they're seeing a few candidates. Again, not the candidates that I think we would all really like to see coming in with some good experience for those general classroom areas.
Can you specify like how many there are for the business manager?
3.
Okay, and how many for the special ed federal programs?
2.
And then
Got the third one for business manager yesterday.
oh, cool. Are we going to be flying the supervisor of the bus transportation? I haven't
The
seen that.
assistant one.
Well, the assistant one's been flown, right?
Well, you had put that on hold, so that is
Okay.
now been re-upped. And I know some interviews have been happening with our bus folks, so I have not heard back from them on there. There was one candidate that came up and then we interviewed that person. I don't know the result of that. In terms of which is an action item based off of board direction of moving, for instance, Roseanne Graham right into that transportation director. You may want to hold, and I can certainly post those particular pieces.
I did bring it up because I think she does an incredible job. But then I found out, I was reading through and found that it did say any position needs to be advertised. So if we could advertise it for just a little bit and then.
I had mentioned we had a possibility of making that an interim, so at least we had somebody at the wheel, and most people.
I think that we have time for that particular, for those to happen without having to have some interim. We have time until the end of June for that resignation is in full effect. So those things can certainly happen, and you can address that in the action item that comes. Chartwell's contract for food services, just an update. Hooray for food services for Lunch Lady Hero Week. I have a book for some libraries, both up here at CBE and the GEMS. Just a reminder that, we're in the third of a 5-year contract. There's going to be large impacts to your decision on the 4-day school week of operational change. Due to the number of service days being reduced by 20%, that contract going to come back in front of you because there's going to be a significant loss that you're going to have to pick up the other side on. Marine was able to share as a guesstimate somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000 loss. That particular contract, even though you're in the middle of the three out of five, obviously doesn't account for that you might be going to a 4-day school week. Back when they put this in front of you all 3 years ago. So that will raise to the surface sometime here in the next few months for you to go back over and understand the operational change. The other thing that's important to note about our food service program, we really were in the black this last 2 years because we basically everybody had free food service. There was no charge. Every school in America had that. Now that has been reversed, and now we are back to the free and reduced lunch applications that generate your Title I dollar amounts through those applications as a factor in that. So they're really important. And there's a lot of reluctance for families to fill those out. But we push them and try and get as many of those completed. And as you may imagine, as they get older in our high school populations, those forms are we hardly see them. See more and more in the K-6 scenario. So
you're indicating that we could be on the hook for 80,000.
well, there's going to be an impact, and because the contract that you all signed was geared around a 5-day week, they are going to have to do something completely with all of their staffing. I don't want to misspeak on the particular piece of what the contract looked like, but you will see a new contract that you'll have to move through. Chartwell's is not obviously in the business of just writing off a loss. That mixed with Maureen, I think you're here. Are you still here? Tell me, let me pick on you real quick.
The timeline is much sooner. We usually have a calendar at the beginning of March. I need a accepted calendar, whatever it is, get it to my boss. He punches the numbers, it goes to legal, and they adjust. The basic language year over year is the same, but it's our fee rates and our guarantees. Because when we talk about you losing X amount of dollars, that's my job to try to still keep us as positive as possible. If I fall below what they considered your max, the company will match, they will return $10,000 to you. Because we didn't fulfill our contract of the amount of the loss. So an accurate calendar, help from everybody in the school offices, getting those free and reduced applications out and inputted. And we do have a charge policy, and it's going to be ugly next year because your current charge policy allows 1 charge at the high school level, 3 at the elementary. Okay, but in all the years I've been here, well, no, not all of them, it took me 3 or 4 years to get us break even. We've never had outstanding lunch debt at the end of the year because we follow our policy. We work with the nurses, the office people. If people are not filling out their applications, that can be turned over to officials. They're not taking care of their kids. But the school district is not going to foot the bill for tens of thousands of dollars of lunch charges like you see in other school programs. So if we could please get a calendar, then I
Maureen,
can give you a contract.
I sent out and I gave the number, which is a little bit of a shock to the board on that 80,000. Did I misspeak, or is that something?
No, but it's a twofold thing. When we go back, it's been 2 years, everybody has been free. It's been a free ride. When we start school next year, if your kid is in high school, it's going to cost them $3 for breakfast and $3.50 for lunch. That's $6.50 a day if you're a paid person. Okay. They're not going to want to pay that. And when you drop the number of serving days by 20%, that just compounds the dwindling. When it's free, everybody eats when it's free. But your participation levels, like Todd was mentioning, at the high schools, you're lucky to be in the mid 30% for free and reduced. Grangeville Elementary is only like 45%, That's why we don't have an after-school snack program up here like we do in Kuski, because they don't qualify. Now, Kuski is about 68%.
Is there a way to get those filled out in like a more confidential way, so it doesn't go to the school? You know, is there a digital way to get that
We
stuff done?
currently have an active online application available as well as sending out paper copies.
And we assure them, it's extremely confidential. Whether the parent agrees that it is or it isn't, it only goes to one person when it comes into the building.
Your free and reduced numbers drive a lot of your special programs, your title programs.
So that form is available to people that don't want the paper form to go to the school?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I don't think anybody knows about that.
No, it's been on there.
I've never, yeah, I didn't know, and I'm looking at a couple teachers that are
So-
like, we had no clue.
3 years ago is when the online application first came out and there were some bugs in the system. And our person at the time didn't grasp some of the nuances. I've had Michael Stevens on this from about a month ago. He found the glitches. And it now, if the parent fills it out, submits it, the secretary actually gets an alert that says, oh, you have one pending. And then they go in and they do their thing and process it, because again, once you accept that application, then you have to prepare for verification, which is every November when you randomly select 3% of your applications and review them for compliance. And, you know, you have to have spreadsheets that the free and reduced numbers feed your ICs reports. So it's all connected.
And at the end of the day, there's a verification process that requires school personnel to do that, which happens to be the lady to my left. And it's a big job. And so confidential, no one else is, it's as confidential as possible. But there will be a school official that has to look, and you do have to give some personal information.
So I can tell you for 7 years of doing those forms for those parents, I am the only one who saw those until they went home.
So are they in the original registration packet that we get every year?
Yeah.
But then we had to fill them out again, and then,
Every year you have to
Yeah.
fill them out. Yeah, you don't, that's the difficult piece. And then with the free, the last 2 years, we're gonna have to try to re-engage parents in the process. But it's a critical piece of your funding model, because it generates a dollar amount. So as Lacey said, these secretaries are also kind of hounding, hey, get it in, make sure that it's into your backpack.
Yeah, because then most generally they get to eat off of last year's application for like the first week or two.
No, it's 30 operating days from the
30
first day of
operating days.
school as your carryover from the prior year.
Thank you. So you have 30 days once school starts to get it done.
so if we need to offer like a grab and go type thing Thursday afternoons, is that something Chartwell's would add to make I don't know, is there like a supper club or something, or some sort of snack, or would that help or no?
There is a program called the supper program. Really, it's just a second lunch served after the school hours. I really can't say if Grangeville would even qualify based on their historical free and reduced numbers. Not likely.
Okay. And CV already has that?
CBE has 4 days a week where this is a snack that we get $1 for. It's like a fruit juice and a thing of crackers. It's a little baby snack. Supper is basically the same thing as a lunch. It's 2 grains, it's 2 meats, it's a fruit, it's a veg, it's milk.
Okay. Thank you.
Roof bids, at the time I wrote this, no update. The Ty and I have been updated that the process is going with the engineering firm to obtain those bid process. As you recall, last time at CB High, we just had 1 bid for you to look at. It's going to be that firm again. The wonderful deluge that we had created a myriad of different other leak points here in the high school that we weren't accustomed to. There are severe problems in this very building you're sitting in, and hopefully you guys can get that mitigated. So the engineering firm is going to push that out to bid. The roof company said there's a possibility we could start phase 1 in the fall. But that's going to be once you have, the bid has to get done, opened, and all to meet the processes of those dates.
Because this is in part due to the structure that was put in place, is there any insurance? Can we run it through an insurance claim and just see if it would be covered?
You can do anything. I'm pretty sure what they're going to tell you.
Right, I
They're
know,
gonna
that's what they
say
usually tell
How
you,
old time I've had this conversations. It's, we don't know how many years ago it was done. The part that we're most worried about wasn't leaking last week. It was a different part that was leaking, which is baffling. So even to just go up and say, well, this is what's damaged, we can't see where it's leaking. We can't see any damage. So insurance is going to say, what have we lost? We haven't lost a wall yet. We're hoping that there isn't something that might say there's $5,000 worth of damage to meet your deductible. But the roof piece will be that the life of the roof has exhausted itself, and you're gonna have to fix it. And I think you're gonna get on top of it with occupied building maintenance funds, hopefully in the fall. I'll just say again, in Ty's and I's conversation is if they have to phase it and be done for the winter, that happened to us last year at CV. There's a phase 1 that Ty knows, kind of in the middle of this, there's a strange roof situation. They will, I believe, will tackle that first. That's the goal. And then they have to come back in the spring to get everything else completed. They'll do that. So that's the plan. I wish I could give you more, but until you get the bid, you won't really know whether you can accept it or not. Oh, just want to update you, they asked about a reception service with Candragon. Right now, it's about $360-70 a month for you to add something like that. Right now, we have an automated service that you call at the admin office, and you can self-direct to an employee's voicemail. So I just say to you that it's worth holding right now until you at least get some new people in there to figure out. And you and I spoke, Mr. Dunn, so I want to just update on that.
Thanks.
And they can do certain services there. One of the conversations was, would you have a human being actually answer the phone and they could direct you? That would be the fee. And maybe that's something to decide later on to go down. I also looked at the board training and Idaho Association of School Administrators. They're looking into see if there's some board training opportunities for you guys in July and August. I just said that I would look into that, just give you some information on that moving forward. That's all I have.
I had requested to do the ISBA Listing Conference on May 25th. Did you guys get that request through an email? Okay, but you got it. So that's awesome. Okay, thank you.
That's all I have.
All right, very good. Moving on to action items. Number 1 is we have a board committee, myself and Ms. Myers are working on that. This is with respect to a rewrite of job descriptions. I'd say we're about 80% done. I would like to move, if you're okay with this, of course, move them over to the superintendent's office for a check. There's the existing job descriptions have legal reference points at the bottom of them. I just need to make sure that those are still accurate. It doesn't seem too terribly complicated, but I expect we might be able to get something that the board can look at with respect to a decision, possibly by the 16th, but more likely by the 1st of next week.
Okay. Just want to entertain the table for them to table that.
That would be my recommendation, just because we're time constraints being what they are for us as well. We're not 100% finished, and we haven't moved them over to your desk yet. So that makes sense. So we're just going to go ahead and table that.
Lacey, why don't
Probably-
you just make the motion to table?
Mr. Chairman, I motion that we table action item number 1.
I second it.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And moving on, we have item 2, which discussed very early on. The reopening negotiations for school year 21-22 with respect to the Central Idaho Education Association.
There's a piece of paper I gave you all, that's a 244 heading on it, so that's the language being asked to open up the request. Work that we're doing currently with negotiations. One of the particular pieces of language that they'd like to add in there, we feel is relevant with the legislative change around trying to be more clear on the acceptance of out-of-state experience. That work has been done, and we have some staff that are impacted by this, where they could be placed more effectively in the career ladder. Anything for you guys to add? Our 2 board members sit on that team, and basically we're asking you to open it. We're going to jump in and have the language change into the addition language 3.2. Then you'd obviously approve that particular language addition and jump back out.
Basically, all we'd be asking to do is reopen the 2021-2022 negotiations with just the intent to amend the agreement specifically for this situation. And the only reason for the request is just a change that the state legislature made that would allow us to do something that we were not allowed to do before. We were not allowed to recognize necessarily within the state's placement for career ladders out of state teachers and employees as they were coming in. So if you came from out of state and you had, you should have sit into our salary and career schedule as like a P5. We didn't have a choice. We had to put you in as a P1 because the state didn't recognize your experience. So all we're really doing is saying, as an intention to attract, number 1, and number 2, retain out of state teachers as they come into our district, that we would be able to treat them the same as teachers coming from in-state, as long as they meet the same exact qualifications. So they still have to dot their I's and cross their T's and make the qualifications. We just want to be able to give them that opportunity. So with that in respect, I would make a motion that we reopen the 2021-2022 negotiations with only the intent to amend the agreement to include that MVSD recognizes out-of-state educators and endeavors to place them correctly on the career ladder. All applicable years of experience that are verified and meet all the qualifications outlined by the state of Idaho will be placed accordingly on the career ladder. And we're just asking for that, and that's it. So open it, accept that language, sign off on it, and be done, and it's closed.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, the next action item is number 3, 4-day school week. It's in parentheses after that. It says potential budget impacts, staffing impacts, scheduling holidays, start and stop times, and others. Is a big topic.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to set a date for a special meeting to reevaluate the 4-day school week and to discuss any and all future subjects pertaining to the 4-day school week at that time.
So an additional special meeting.
Can you read that again?
I make a motion to set a date for a special meeting to reevaluate the 4-day school week and to discuss any and all future subjects pertaining to the 4-day school week at that time.
We want to revisit our decision. Reopen our decision for reconsideration is what I understand. I would second that. Discussion. Part of what we need to discuss, I suppose, is if we could have a vote and then decide. We got to pick a date. Later on.
I would like to see it far enough out that it could be, perhaps the newspaper could put something in there to allow the general public to know about it this time. You can do that. You don't have to. Put something flash.
Further discussion? All in
You want-
favor?
Well, I want to discuss, I just wanted to give Casey the opportunity to talk first, to discuss first, because you were the one that made the motion.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so we voted and things are in place now. And there's 175 employees and there's 1,175 kids that have made their changes. And in Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, it says a matter that was voted on could be brought back again through the motion to reconsider. Under Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, this motion must be made within a limited time after the action on the original motion, either on the same day or in the case of a multi-day session, such as a convention on the next day within the session in which business is conducted. So says until the motion is reconsidered, is disposed of or lapsed, the effect of the original vote is suspended and no action may be taken to implement it. So it would have had to been done in a timely manner, and we're into May now. And you tabling all of this just creates more uncertainty for everybody that works here and people that have already made plans, and it's on a 2-year probation period anyway. And contrary to Jill's belief, I spent 100, maybe more hours researching it. And she spoke about us not having a deficit next year. And we're not considering a 4-day this year. I mean,
I'm talking about not this coming year.
I know you're talking about the
following.
next year, but you understand that it carries over, right? So if we don't do a 4-day this year, we're gonna have even less money next year. And so principals have been hired. Well, a principal has been hired. People have been hired on the preface that there was a 4-day week. It's been in the paper. I mean, not that that makes everything 100%, but I feel like, I think legally we can't revote. And I think addressing this every single meeting we have, we need to move on and make decisions on what's happening. I know change is hard. And I know when you're at the starting line, it's really scary to make that race, right? But other districts have done it. It's been successful. Yes, academically, it goes either way if it's been beneficial or not. But I would rather have a 4-day week than lose teacher positions. I'd rather have a good teacher on 4 days than a mediocre teacher on 5.
I would just have to say that I think that there is a point of what Casey is saying, to have, more intense, involved discussion on it. I am not discounting any research that you've done, but I know that a lot of the schools that go to this typically take a year or more in their planning. And I know I'm not saying that, and I don't think Casey's saying that we don't do it. I think he's saying revisit the situation to say, do we have adequate time to get everything in place to do this and do it properly and appropriately? And, you know, we can study 4-day school weeks for everywhere. But have we in depth, or have you in depth studied exactly what a 4-day school week looks like for Mountain View School District? And we've revisited this at numerous meetings, and we haven't made any decisions of exactly how it would work and what we would do. And I think that just the question on the table is, can we have a meeting to discuss having, let's say, more adequate planning? Have a task force look at exactly what this would mean and how we would do it and what we would save and how it would work for our kids and our students in our community, not other communities in Idaho or in the country. And then I think the big thing that's also the concern is to, you know, there's positive public input and there's negative public input, and give the community the opportunity to have a little bit more input. And we could do surveys like we've done before. You know, what are the concerns? Where we want to see it go? I think that, you know, we made a decision, yes, but we've made decisions before and gone, you know what, I think we maybe should revise that. For instance, you know, we voted for furlough days, and then we went back and said, hey, I think we could make a change and do that differently. Rushing into something, I agree. I agree with Casey. I think we need to revisit it and make sure that we are giving enough consideration, planning, and time, not asking for our teachers and our administrators and our staff who are already dealing with a lot of stuff to jump into something within a short, you know, 3-month period of time. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying let's, if we're going to do it, be better prepared.
Okay, I don't know what do you want to tell the employees of the district right now? Are you going to tell them that next year is going to be a 4-day, or next year is going to be a 5-day? Because they need to know.
The motion that's on the table right now, Casey is saying he'd like to have a meeting scheduled.
But does that
to
entail you
discuss
guys re-voting on it? Because they need to know. The district, the community, the parents, everybody needs to know what they can plan on for this next year.
Well, I think if it's a thing about savings, then we need, I believe you said, well, you and Lacey both had the figures that they were the 5% savings. I'd like to see you, both of you, demonstrate how we're gonna save that. Where's the money coming from? If you
So
can-
that's what you want from me in order to
Yeah,
move
if
forward
you
with the
can
4-day?
if you can convince me that we're gonna save $550,000. fine.
Okay, I love that it's my job. I mean, I'll totally do it, but you could do that as well. I mean, I feel like I do a lot of the homework here, and then there's a lot of like,
It's you, though, that's saying that you can save 550,000. It's me saying I
Okay.
don't think there's a savings.
I think I think the reason why I think this needs to be a bigger meeting and bigger discussion is the entire board, and we've asked this to be, I know I've asked for it to be an agenda item and asked for input of, and Todd said we can't put this on our administrators of where, you know, do your best to save money. If we're gonna say this is a 4-day school week, we need to give guidance of where it is that we are making cuts and where we're saving money. And I'm not saying it's you, B, I'm not saying it's Lacey or any one of us. Everybody needs to bring that to the table, and there needs to be a plan. And just to say, yes, we want to do this, we have to have some kind of a plan of how we're going to implement it. And I think it's fiscally responsible to, if we can't say how we're going to do it and what we're going to cut and where we're going to save it, then we need to provide the direction. I'm not saying just you, but that direction needs to be provided. And there needs to be a time when we sit down, dig in, and get it done.
okay, when we first started, I'm pretty sure we had like what the responsibilities of a superintendent were and what the responsibilities of a board member were. And I'm pretty sure managerial was not in our column.
I'm not saying manager.
And
saying
I'm not
if we're
gonna-
making cuts, if the 4-day week saves us money and we have to make cuts, we need to give broad guidelines of where.
The board has never directed me to give any input on a 4-day week. My team has not been directed to give any input on a 4-day week. I've not held a conversation with all of my principals about the impact of a 4-day week.
I have asked.
So
And-
that is not something that has been tasked by my leadership team in order to give you guys all what we think might be the impacts to student learning. We can get into the financial pieces of what that might be, but what I want to know is, where are you going to cut? You're going to need to tell people, are you going to cut 20%? Everybody? Everybody but teachers? Are you going to tell your new superintendent that he or she doesn't work Friday? Are they going to, I mean, you got to be that clear. Is every principal cut one day? Every classified cut. You need to be that clear on, yes, we are going to, no one will be in the buildings on a Friday unless it's scheduled on the calendar.
So these are discussions that we should have had before we took the vote. And nobody told me there was going to be a vote. There was nothing on the agenda that, hey, we're going to vote on a 4-day school week. In fact, the chairman indicated to me that we weren't going to have a vote on it. But there are things that we need to look at that we didn't know last time. Going along with Mr. Fisk, is all hourly people going to be limited to 32 hours?
I would second your motion, Casey, but I would make the request, if the rest of the board would agree, and if you would amend your motion, that we make the request to our staff, to our administrators, to give their input around. Well, you said you've not.
We have one leadership meeting left for the end of the year. The agenda sets next Tuesday. There's a lot of work that goes into something like this in terms of your decision making. I'm not going to step in whether for or against that. That is not something you need to hear from me. But I don't want the board to suggest that I had or my team had some ample time to try and get some of the work done around it. We did not. And again, whether it's right or wrong, I'm not weighing in on it. Ultimately, what you have set for your new superintendent will be really important to have it outlined clearly for the direction that they need to take the district in. And this is going to be a very large impact. But even doing so before you leave the year is outlining to those folks what are the budgetary constraints that you're looking. I've heard, I don't want any impacts. I don't think we should impact. But right off the bat, 20% hits transportation. Where you're reimbursed, some of the best reimbursement rates that you get out of any department is that, but that's 20% gone. You're going to lose 20% of those routes. You're going to get hit in nutrition. But what's next? You're going to be adding time to the day. We know that. So even if you added an hour to the day, I don't believe it's certainly not that. You added 4 hours, so you're cutting someone around 3.5, 4 hours a week. If you want more than that, do you want less than that? Does that include your principals? They need to know. Are they going to be in the building on those particular days? Are you cutting them 20%? You're cutting maintenance, custodial. That's all the clarity I'm looking for. And really, quite frankly, it's not for me. It would be for me, but it's got to be in place for your next leader, so they know.
Thank you, Mr. Fish. That's exactly what I have listed. We don't know, do we? Are the administrators, are their contracts next year going to be cut by 20%? Is the maintenance going to be cut by 20%? Is all the parapros going to be cut 20%?
Well, that's my question back to you folks is.
That's why we should have had this, and I'm not blaming you, and I know you haven't been direct, but this is something that we should have had a discussion before we slipped it through.
That's
The way we did. There was no transparency in what we did. As I recall, many of the candidates for school board, they kept talking about transparency. Where was the transparency in this? There's one parent that came to testify. She wasn't even a parent. She lives in another town and says she's got a 4-year-old son. The only one that even knew there was going to be a vote that night. So
Pretty sure I put it all over Facebook and asked everybody in the community that I saw, anybody that I asked. I mean, I met with teachers, I did a lot of research in this community.
Okay, well, you did.
I asked Andrew Lane, I mean, I asked a bunch of people. I asked
Inform the board.
hundreds.
I didn't know it wasn't on the agenda. They told me.
Casey, the 4-day week was mentioned because of the cost savings. I did a presentation
No,
on it.
I'm talking about having the vote that night without any planning.
Well, I figured when we voted on March 28th, that there would be some sort of leadership that would come involved, that we voted a March 28th 4-day week. So with that, if I were a leader, I would say, oh, okay, let's get these guys together and let's talk about how we're gonna make this happen. I would like propose, I don't think I need to ask our superintendent.
As a
For
leader of
direction.
your school, what I need from a school board is for them to involve my team of educators to present to this board what we feel the pros and cons of a 4-day week. I don't need assumptions by you, Ms. Edwards, and I don't need you to attack my professionalism, Ms. Edwards. So you shouldn't make the assumption around that. At the end of the day, your job is to try and direct what we could tell our team about what's going to happen to your check next year. And you have bounced around that month after month. If you're going to just say it's 20%, then I can inform them and do my leadership role.
I don't think it needs to be 20%.
All right,
Can we just talk to them about it? I went to the previous leadership meeting. I was gonna go to the one and then it was canceled. I will go to the Tuesday one.
No, it's not on the agenda to talk about.
So you're
It is,
just not,
it is
you don't
much,
want it.
no, I won't let you pin me on this. This is much bigger than me just adding an agenda item late in the game
My
to
job
talk
is to
about.
figure out how to save money on the budget. That is the direction that I gave, that we voted on together, all of us. And my job is not to manage.
But if we're making budget cuts, it is our job to say what those budget cuts will be.
We did. We said 4-day week and we gave 7 other stipulations on that.
A 4-day week is much more complicated than just saying the words of 4-day. Every school district does it a little bit differently, and what their guidelines for their employees are very differently. I mean, the information that Larry sent around to the entire board, that huge dissertation, every school district in Idaho does it differently. They have different requirements for their employees of how many hours they can work a week, whether they're full-time, they're not full-time, how many days and that is something we said. How many contracted days do our staff have? How many contracted days do our administrators have? And that directly goes to their pay. And those are things that we set the budget that is on us. And it's not fair of us to just turn to our administration and say, well, we voted for a 4-day school week, you figure it out.
But I can't talk.
And I think the
Do you want me
motion,
to talk to the principals? Like, what do you want us to do? How do we move forward with this?
I think the motion on the table is to have a meeting to get in depth and have discussion and move forward on it.
With just us?
for starters.
Because I think we've had enough meetings about it. I think we need to get the people that are actually relevant involved.
But my position at this point is that I agree with what Casey said, with what Melissa said. I think it was done without. It's been interesting to me since this has happened. A number of people have contacted me and said, "What about this? What about that?" And I
So we
think
figure
those
it
are
out.
fair. Excuse me. I
Sorry.
think those are fair questions. And the motion on the table is simply that we have a meeting to specifically focus on this, to even advertise it, that we want people to come in and hash this out. And we probably should have done that before we had a vote. And for that, I'll take responsibility because as the chair, I have control of the agenda. That being said, I prefer that we didn't continue talking about what's happened, but talking about how we're going to move forward. And I agree with the idea of having a meeting specifically around this topic, because I don't see what we lose. With respect to your point about Robert's Rules of Order, we can fight that later if we need to. If it never comes up, then so much the better. But I think there's been some valid points raised, and I would mention that we have a motion on the table. I don't know if
So I just want to clarify, is this meeting
No, I
to,
think-
is this meeting to plan Is this meeting to plan for the 4-day? Or is this the meeting talking about going back to a 5-day? Because the
This meeting is to
Employees
discuss,
need to know.
this meeting is to discuss setting a meeting. Okay, that's the motion, is to set a meeting to have those exact discussions. And then, so I would say that all options are on the table, because to do otherwise would be dishonest to me, because I'm not the only person that has a vote on this.
So the employees won't know again if it's a 4-day or 5-day week.
And if we would have had those discussions before you pushed the vote through.
All right.
I'm
All
pretty sure.
right.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a motion on the table. I'd like to call for a vote at this time.
Restate the motion.
Yes, please.
Have the motion restated.
Mind restating your motion.
I make a motion to set a date for a special meeting to reevaluate the 4-day school week and to discuss any and all future subjects pertaining to the 4-day school week at that time. It's not real difficult. I'm looking for a meeting.
I seconded it. I believe Melissa even seconded it. So we are at the position of, I will at this time call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay. Sorry, I convinced you to stay.
Next action item. The liability forms and.
There are liability forms I put in your packets for you guys, for your
I'm gonna
consideration.
blow up protocol and ask, are you gonna set the date now, or are you gonna wait till the next meeting to set the date? or
That's
what
good
now?
We're
point.
just gonna draw
Thank you,
employees
Mrs.
out months and
Thank
then
you,
they'll
Mrs. Stevens.
all leave and then we'll have to hire hundreds. We're just gonna do that.
That wasn't the wording in his original.
Let's go ahead.
In his
Mr.
original
Stevens is
motion.
right.
On bingo. On bingo. Gotta love bingo.
Set that, excuse me, go ahead and set that date.
Well, if we can get it in the paper. We're too late for next week's paper.
Not if I know by Monday.
Yeah, so if we make this such a motion. I'm available anything next week.
Any,
Any of them.
same here. So
No, 15. Tuesday's out for me. I have a meeting.
What are we talking about? The week of the 16th?
the week of the ninth,
Yeah, no, the 9th through the 13th,
9th through 13th.
because we have a meeting on the.
Okay, well, the
16th.
papers don't come out till Thursday. I would say next week is out.
You want to do that as a subsection of your board meeting on the 16th?
You know, I'm afraid this meeting, by the time, there's a lot to discuss.
Yeah.
You know, who's gonna get cut 20%? Are the schools gonna be locked down on Fridays? Are there gonna be no sports trainings on Fridays? Is there gonna be no games on Fridays? It could be a long meeting, so I don't know that it should be part of the regular board meeting. Unless you don't have anything else for the next board meeting.
Hopefully don't delay it any further, but about like the first half that week, the 19th.
But you can still have a meeting. I mean, it's, you can probably Zoom it for me. Like I'm sure I can. 19th.
The next scheduled board meeting is the 16th,
16th,
correct?
yeah. 19th, all right.
You didn't
So
ask
far.
me, but it's okay for me too.
It's good. Let's just have it in the mind to speak up. Melissa, does that work for you, the
Yeah,
19th?
the 19th, okay.
Thank you for this. All right. Usual time, 5:30 or? We want to start early.
Works for me.
5:30?
We
All
have this
right.
from a goose fee?
Fine with me. I'm resuming.
You mean you're not gonna be here?
No, I won't be in town.
Well, I think we should have it here.
So I'm gonna ask Lacey to chair the meeting.
Better do it
And
tomorrow.
in the interest, I won't be available for a meeting until the week of the 29th. But I think that's getting out there a little far.
Well, that's almost the end of school year.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That's why I offered to Zoom because that's an option.
Maybe you can change your plans.
Not likely.
We can do Wednesday the 18th as well.
I'm available tomorrow.
So when are you gone, Larry? What? from
I'm
what-
gone the week of the 15th and I'll be back on the 29th.
That's a little bit more than the 15th. We'll be back.
15th through the 29th. I'm sorry, correct.
Could we do Tuesday night, the 10th?
17th.
Oh, you want it in the paper, never mind.
17th, yeah, 17th through the 29th. Later.
What about the end of next week
Thursday, the 12th?
or the 13th?
I'm fine with that.
13th is- Oh, yeah, it's Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do it on the 12th.
That was Friday the 13th.
Well, then we have the issue Casey brings up about getting it advertised.
That'll be in Wednesday's paper,
Well, the
so,
papers come out down in my area on Thursday, so
oh,
if it was a Friday or Saturday meeting, why?
yeah, that's not happening for me, sorry.
Sounds like Friday.
Friday the 13th. 13th, or 12th.
Does anybody have? Okay, so the 13th?
13th, Friday the 13th.
The 13th is not good for me, but your decision is can be put into place for me, and your new superintendent.
We probably need you there.
Mhm.
So could we do the 12th? The paper comes out on Thursday or no?
You be here on
I
the
can be here
12th?
the 12th.
Okay.
And we decided Kuski, is that right?
5:30.
We'll just put it at CV High.
Sounds good.
That sound okay?
Did you catch all that word?
I think we should be prepared at that meeting to demonstrate the savings and to decide the cuts. Our administrator's gonna take a 20% cut? Are all hourly people gonna take a 20% cut?
And then the college was, right?
That's what we need to decide. is what I believe.
Yeah.
I guess you and I are doing it.
All right, so moving on to liability forms in lieu of athletic transportation, which we have 3.
Yeah, there's 3 different examples in there. This was, the decision you folks have made around we're not going to transport anybody for sports next year. And there are different waivers that you'd like to put in front of parents to have signed off. 8105F, the F just represents policy as a form, is the easiest one. Once it's filled out, you can put it for the whole year. There are others that are a little more involved. The location of the activity, you're gonna have, I think it's gonna be very cumbersome if you're trying to do every game. Where as a principal, it's gonna impact our 2 high school principals where they can get this form on file and signed by anybody transporting their own students or their own players and students or somebody else. It's there's an exposure, a liability exposure will always exist even with the form signed, but it would be good to have this in place. That's my particular recommendation, other than the fact that you could have it signed, make it easy, have it on file, and then for a principal try and go each game or each activity, it's not gonna ever keep up.
Could we also, like in addition to this form, I think part of where this came up was including not a disclaimer, but a recommendation. I mean, I don't care who it comes from. I think several of our insurance companies in the local area have suggested that we explain to parents and everyone how it works of liability coverages and things like that. If you allow someone to take your child, you know, you should check this and liability, or is that just in a weird place to give that spiel?
It does actually place you in kind of an interesting liability issue where you're just saying, hey, the game is at Nespers and it's at 5:30. See you there. Rather than how you've outlined, you know, then the liability falls, coach said, well, you're riding with, Lacey, you got yours crew with, you know, so let those parents handle that particular piece, outline how they're doing that. And again, just having a form on file. Simplest.
How did it work last year? I know the contractor from Kuski. Did he reimburse the school? He paid for some transportation for the football. How does that work?
They give the transportation to see the mileage. There's a cost per mile. So they'll ask, what is the amount? What does it cost to go to match? And we can give them a number, and they've sent that amount to the district office, and we just put it into that account. I'd imagine there'll be some of that coming up next year.
So. The parent paid for that bus. He did it because his kid was a senior. I think it was 221 a mile at that time. I also paid personally out of my pocket for my daughter's junior high bus. And quarterly, Freedom Northwest Credit Union has a, well, you can go in and talk to the board and ask them for something that you need. So myself and another parent went there and I asked them for $2,500 because that's what it was going to cost to do the rest of the sports for the rest of the year. And they gave it, and it went directly to CBE schools, junior high and high school. And I don't know that we actually ran out of all that money.
And when we had asked about donations, because there were several community members that asked about donations or raising money for things like that, Becky had said, you know, they can just basically write a check to the school, specifically say what it's for. Unless it's something that, no, we can't take that, then it would go specifically just for that.
Right, and when I did it, I had them just bill me. And then I just paid for that.
Whatever it was, I would make a motion that we would accept this very straightforward, non-destructional operations 8105 F, if it's not something we already have in place on.
Yeah,
It's not.
Second that.
Something better.
I'm gonna understand something here. This is, as I read this is 810.5F. Says I'll say Fred Smith, parent or guardian of Alice Smith, hereby have chosen to provide transportation for this child to and from all extracurriculars. So this puts, with respect to liability management, is all I'm thinking about. Okay, this puts all the onus on the parent or the guardian name, which is fine. One of the things that pops up with respect to liability management is having kids transported by people who may be unknown, much less unapproved by their parents. Unfortunately, that's the times that we live in. Somebody who isn't an actual guardian. Things happen, you know, people can't do as they indicate they would or whatever. And it's Uncle Joe who lives with us, he can do it. Okay, you go do it, that sort of thing. I like this, I'm fine with it. And it's just, I'm not sure how you deal with parents not transporting their own kids, but this doesn't cover that.
Well, that would, because it says I take full responsibility for the transportation of this child to and from all extracurricular activities. So whether the child is getting it approved through the parent probably, hopefully, knows that the kid has an activity or event and is helping coordinate that transport.
I would say in practice, every coach that I know of in our district basically says if it's not your parent, then your parent needs to say whoever it is, okay. Right. I don't know of any coaches that don't enforce that just for personal safety issues.
That would-
And a lot of them have signed, like sheets that have to be signed. If your kid's going with someone else, they either have to have a note or you sign them out of the bus. Right, they've already got some good practices as
All
far
right, if
as
that's the case, and that gets formalized with respect to this, and that answers the issue. I think we have a motion on the table. Second. Hearing no further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? Thank you. All right, action item number 5, with respect to new hires and resignations, we have 4 items. And I
Board
believe
wants to
this,
pause on those other two, certainly can go through those particular postings. Decide that promotion. On action item 5A, obviously all of that has been, all of those interviews are done. Certainly start there.
I move that the board accepts 5A and 5D. Second that.
all in favor? Aye, opposed or none?
I make a motion that we table items B and C as they have as they're advertised. Unless someone disagrees, I don't think we need to have a long advertisement. Right.
Who seconded the A and B?
Melissa.
That was me.
You second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, opposed?
There are, sorry,
Oh, yes, sir.
for action item 6, the ISBA representatives did have some things. Did you get that, Joe? Oh, I texted you. Oh, okay, good. They just wanted to come on and talk to us outside of executive and then move into executive. Is that okay?
How are they gonna talk to us?
They're on the Zoom call,
Oh,
so they just wanted to be able to speak to us.
well,
That's not like, how am I supposed to?
while you're working on that, I'm just gonna mention, the executive session in this case would be called under, Idaho Code 74206, 1A, if I read it correctly, which is to consider personnel matters, in which case the public is not privy to the information of the conversation. So this would essentially conclude. I don't believe there's going to be an action. Will there be? an
There
action?
was supposed to be an action. Did you get my email?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think with that was already sent out, that you come out,
Yeah,
to come out and make an action item.
there's something. Okay.
Yeah,
So-
that's why it's listed as an action item. I thought we could just include that.
All right. Do you have any idea how much the presentation? I'm not trying to pin you down. It's just hard to say.
No idea, maybe
I'm just
20
saying for the
minutes?
people that may want to.
Oh,
hang
maybe
around.
10 minutes? I don't know.
Yeah.
Joe?
So we're going
You
to
know?
executive session. Everybody needs to clear the room. and then
Not
we'll-
yet.
Have a motion to
No,
go
not
into
yet, not
executive
yet.
session.
We're not
Please,
there
follow
yet.
part of the procedure, please.
Anyway,
They said
then we'll
certain
reconvene
boards that.
the meeting to the public. So if you want to wait around.
This is public.
Didn't you say you were gonna do the public thing and then go to executive?
Correct, yeah,
session?
we haven't made a motion yet to go into executive session.
No, I'm sorry.
We're just explaining what we're trying to. There you go. We're just giving Joe a hot second. Put him on the spot. Come on, Joe.
Sorry, Joe. I thought it was just.
There are two.
Yes, Catherine and Misty.
Okay, they're unmuted.
Can you guys go ahead and talk?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sort of.
Sort of. I'll try to talk a little bit loud. Is this better?
Perfect.
Okay. I'm Catherine Bates with the Idaho School Boards Association, and I'm assisting the district with their superintendent search. I'll let Misty introduce herself real quick.
Hello, I'm Misty Swanson. I'm the executive director with the Idaho School Boards Association, and we really appreciate you all allowing us to attend your meeting and also participate and be as transparent as we possibly can be. So thank you. I'll turn it back over to Catherine.
Part of the search service for it to be reimbursable is for us to do this short training. And I know it's been a long evening, so I'll try to keep this somewhat brief. We like to remind boards from the beginning that, when you're starting this process, that one of the most important decisions that you can make as a board is hiring your next superintendent. It's a really exciting time for the district. I know it can be a little bit scary, but this is your opportunity to carve out a new path and sort of redefine the direction that you want to take the district. And so it's a big decision, but it's an exciting one. And really what we've seen, what we often tell districts is that our job is simply to assist the board. So we're sort of here to help kind of redirect you back to the qualifications that you all first determined or identified that you were looking for, and to kind of be on the sidelines providing that guidance. So I'm going to walk through just a couple of things on open meeting law, since a lot of this evening, right, you kind of shuffle it from open meeting to executive session, and there are some, there's important things to think about as you're hiring a superintendent, and there have been examples of when boards can be in violation, so we like to kind of provide that information up front. So let me kind of take a look here. If we were in person, we would kind of, we would hand out and give everybody one of these Idaho open meeting law manuals. I'm sure probably some of you are familiar with this and have even read it, but it's nice to have on hand. It can be, if you have quick questions, it's a nice reference point. So the first thing is that Idaho Code 74-202 stipulates when boards have to be in open session. And, open meeting laws offer the public a chance to observe the way their governments operate and influence their government in important and meaningful ways. So whenever you're talking about job qualifications at large, you want to be in open session. So if you're thinking about the timeline of the search, job qualifications of the position, the overall sort of process in general, you'll have those discussions in open session. Anytime you're making a decision, so if you're getting to the point where you're thinking about which candidate you're going to move forward as a semifinalist, later down the road when you're thinking about offering, a position of the superintendent position, all of those decisions you'll want to have those in open meeting. So I think like the best thing to remember is don't make a decision in executive session. There are times, however, when meetings are closed to the public, and tonight will be one of those times in which we have to go into executive session. And anytime you're analyzing or discussing qualifications of a particular candidate, those conversations have to be made in executive session. So if you're looking at a candidate's resume, their cover letter, you're looking at any specific personnel records to an individual candidate, all of those discussions and review of information occurs in executive session. Misty, do you want to add anything there?
Nope, I think you've covered it. I mean, the main point is no decision can be made in executive session. So anytime you're making a decision, you're always in open, and anytime you're specifically talking about candidates, you should be in executive session.
The other thing that we just like to mention is the importance of confidentiality during the process of hiring. So when we go into executive session, we'll ask all the board members to sign a confidentiality agreement. We also ask that you disclose, if you know any of these applicants, And if you feel the need to recuse yourself from reviewing the individual's materials because of how closely you know them. The other component that we talk about is EEOC laws, so equal employment opportunity laws. And, really, I think having a good understanding of what EEOC laws are helps protect the district from any legal issues, right? So the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they enforce federal laws that prohibit employment discrimination. So they protect employees and job applicants against employment discrimination. So you don't want to evaluate any candidate or applicant based on how old they are, or if they're pregnant, based on their race or religion or sex. And as a board, you can kind of find yourself in hot water if you discriminate a candidate based on one of those classifications that I had listed. So this means that you don't want to choose or not choose someone because of things like how old they are, or, if they go to, if they share your religion or not. Some things that you don't want to say, gee, I think Fred would be great because he's super young and vibrant. You don't want to say, Alice, I think that she would do great because she goes to our same church, right? These are conversations that you don't want to be having during the interview process, but you also don't want that information to be swaying your decision of hiring a candidate. Misty, do you want to add anything?
Great. Yep.
Okay. The other thing that we like to cover before we review the applicants is just helping the board understand the superintendent certification process. So as you're reviewing applicants, you can kind of understand what they would need to do if they don't have the right certification. So there are 3 ways to receive a superintendent certification. One is that they have their Idaho superintendent endorsement. The other thing that we commonly see is they might have an out-of-state superintendent endorsement. Usually most of their credentials meet Idaho credentials and they apply through the State Department of Ed. Sometimes there's a class or 2 or some minimal additional steps that they might have to take. If a candidate has no endorsement that is applied, the candidate can enroll in an accredited program to receive the university recommendation. So essentially they apply for a temporary certificate while they're completing that 3-year program. I think those are the main points that we just wanted to cover before we review the applicants. Misty, do you have anything you want to add?
That's great.
All right, it's short and sweet tonight.
I would make a motion that we enter executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061A to consider hiring a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent when the respective qualities of the individuals are to be evaluated in order to fill a particular vacancy or need.
I second that.
Favor?
Aye.
You have to do it.
Ready? Okay.
Casey, we gotta do a roll call.
Aye.
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 Well,
Yep.
for
And
executive
then do you
session,
want
you're
them to join
required.
a different one? Or do you want?
I guess pause the recording.
Oh, cool.
Mute everything.
Perfect.
So that's-
And then make sure everybody else
Yes.
leaves.
I suppose this was on the.
Oh, they're going to be in this session.
Correct, the 2 of them, but not the rest of the public. So you just have to make sure everybody leaves.
Give everyone else.
Look at you go. Can I use the restroom before we do this? No.